Professor Zylthar of the prestigious Zyltharian Institute of Biological Sciences reclined in his chair, his tendrils tapping a rhythmic pattern on his crystalline desk. The luminescent orbs of his eyes scanned the amphitheater, where the galaxy's brightest minds had gathered. This year's symposium promised lively debate and groundbreaking insights, with the topic fragility across species and the evolution of resilience. Zylthar prided himself on curating the most diverse array of speakers. Scholars from the regenerating Vorkari, the armored Drenari, and the hibernation-capable Rugalians were in attendance, each eager to showcase their species' survival mechanisms. The final name on the roster caught Zylthar's attention: Dr. Terrance Cole, a human biologist from Earth. Zylthar flicked his tendrils dismissively. Humans were an evolutionary footnote, short-lived, delicate, and devoid of any notable adaptations. Their survival was a fluke, driven by an over-reliance on technology rather than biological merit. Humans, Zylthar mused aloud, his voice tinged with skepticism. A curiosity at best. Still, the human presence intrigued him. Their ambassadors often boasted about the species' unparalleled endurance and adaptability. Boasts without substance, Zylthar muttered to himself, his bioluminescent eyes dimming in disapproval. The symposium hall glowed with holographic displays, each highlighting the presenting species' unique survival traits. A Vorkari video showed their remarkable ability to regrow limbs, earning murmurs of admiration from the audience. The Drenari exhibit demonstrated their nigh-impervious exoskeletons, which withstood plasma bolts with ease. By contrast, the human exhibit showcased footage of what appeared to be leisure activities. Zylthar watched in disbelief as a video of marathon runners, mountaineers, and pugilists filled the screen. Running in circles, climbing unnecessarily high terrain, and bludgeoning each other, Zylthar whispered incredulously. This is their idea of survival. Before he could ponder further, the human biologist, Dr. Terrance Cole, arrived. He was unremarkable by galactic standards, tall but lean, with no visible natural armor or bioluminescence. His only defining feature was his perpetual smile, an expression Zylthar found perplexingly open and trusting. Cole extended a hand in greeting, an oddly primitive gesture. Zylthar hesitated, then mimicked the movement, his tendril brushing against Cole's fingers. Fascinating, Zylthar thought, noting the lack of scales or chitin. The symposium began with the Vorkari delegate, Kelson, whose presentation culminated in a live demonstration. Before the crowd's astonished eyes, she severed her own limb, which began regenerating within seconds. The audience erupted in applause. Next came the Rugalian, Torvek, who described his species' ability to enter a state of suspended animation, surviving for centuries without sustenance. His calm narration belied the dramatic nature of his claims. Finally, it was Cole's turn. Zylthar leaned forward, his tendrils coiling in curiosity as the human adjusted the microphone. "We humans," Cole began, his voice calm but confident, "are not particularly strong, fast, or durable. By most biological metrics, we're unremarkable." The audience shifted uneasily. Why would he start by admitting his species' inferiority? However, Cole continued, "We possess one trait that sets us apart: an extraordinary capacity to endure pain." A ripple of bemusement spread through the crowd. Zylthar's tendrils twitched reflexively. Pain was universally regarded as a signal to cease harmful activity. The idea that a species would pride itself on enduring it seemed not just illogical but reckless. Cole raised a hand to preempt objections. "Allow me to illustrate." The first slide showed a marathon runner collapsing at a finish line, their legs buckling under them. Humans often push themselves to extremes for recreation, Cole explained. This individual ran 42 kilometers, enduring muscle damage, dehydration, and sheer exhaustion. Moments later, they were discussing their next race. The murmurs grew louder, a mixture of disbelief and faint horror. The next slide was a video of a surgical procedure. In this footage, Cole said, "The patient is undergoing surgery while fully conscious. Anesthetic technology exists, of course, but there are documented cases where individuals endure such procedures without it due to necessity or cultural practices." Zylthar felt a ripple of unease pass through the assembly. The notion of willingly enduring such agony was inconceivable. The final slide showed a weathered archival photograph of a soldier. This individual sustained multiple injuries in battle, including a broken leg and severe burns. Despite this, they carried a comrade to safety, a feat that required immense physical exertion and, of course, pain tolerance. Cole stepped back from the podium, letting the weight of his example settle. For humans, pain is not just a warning. It is a challenge, one we often overcome. The QA session that followed was electric. Zylthar, unable to contain his skepticism, raised a tendril to speak. "Dr. Cole," he began, his tone measured but incredulous, "your examples are dramatic. But surely these instances are exceptions, not representative of your species as a whole." Cole smiled, his calm demeanor unwavering. "Actually, Professor, they are representative. Humans routinely push their pain thresholds, whether in childbirth, physical labor, or even recreation. It's woven into our culture and evolution." Zylthar's tendrils curled tightly. Childbirth was regarded as a perilous ordeal even among resilient species. The notion that humans regarded it as routine bordered on madness. When the session ended, applause echoed through the hall, though Zylthar noted a distinct undertone of unease. As the delegates dispersed, the professor felt a growing compulsion to probe deeper into the human phenomenon. That evening, Zylthar invited Cole to join him for a private dinner, ostensibly to discuss Earth's contributions to the symposium. Cole accepted readily, unaware of Zylthar's true intentions. Over a meal of carefully synthesized proteins, Zylthar leaned in. "Dr. Cole, your presentation was fascinating, but it raises an important question. If humans truly possess such remarkable pain tolerance, why do your species remain so fragile?" Cole chuckled softly, setting his utensils aside. "Fragile isn't quite the right word. We're adaptable. What we lack in physical defenses, we make up for with ingenuity and resilience. Pain tolerance is just one part of that equation." Zylthar tilted his head. "And yet, there must be limits. Surely there comes a point when the body succumbs, no matter the will." Cole's expression grew serious. "Of course there's a limit, but you'd be surprised how far we can go before reaching it." Zylthar's tendrils froze mid-motion. "Would you be willing to demonstrate?" The human's grin returned. "You're the scientist. You tell me how." In that moment, Zylthar realized he had underestimated not just human resilience but their audacity. He decided then and there to conduct a series of experiments, hoping to finally understand the enigma of humanity. The experimental chamber at the symposium was a marvel of galactic engineering. Capable of simulating a variety of environmental stressors, it had been used to measure the resilience of some of the most durable species in the known galaxy. Yet as Zylthar prepared the setup, he couldn't shake the nagging thought that no test would be sufficient to fully assess the human phenomenon. Dr. Cole arrived at the chamber, his demeanor relaxed, even curious. He examined the equipment as if it were a toy he was about to try for fun, rather than a tool designed to push him to his limits. "So, what's on the menu?" Cole asked, his tone light. Zylthar's tendrils twitched, a mixture of exasperation and admiration. "The first test will be simple localized pressure applied to an extremity. The intensity will increase gradually. The objective is to endure as long as possible without permanent damage." "Sounds fair," Cole said, rolling up his sleeve. "Let's get to it." The experiment began with Cole's hand secured in a pressure device. Zylthar explained that the test simulated crushing force, similar to what one might experience under a rock slide or debris. The initial pressure was mild, and Cole's expression didn't change. As the force increased, the human's knuckles turned white, but he remained calm. By the 15-minute mark, murmurs filled the observation gallery, where delegates from various species watched intently. Most subjects would have withdrawn by now, unable to endure further. At 20 minutes, beads of sweat formed on Cole's brow. Zylthar noted his clenched jaw and shallow breathing, telltale signs of discomfort. Yet the human didn't flinch. By the 30-minute mark, the murmurs had turned into outright disbelief. The Vorkari delegate leaned closer to Zylthar. "Professor, this is unprecedented. No other species has endured this level of pressure for so long without structural failure. At 40 minutes, Cole finally raised his free hand. "Okay, I think I've made my point," he said with a grin, flexing his fingers as the device released them. "Wouldn't want to break your fancy machine." Zylthar stared, his tendrils stiff with shock. Cole's fingers were bruised, but he flexed them casually, as though he had merely finished a long writing session. "You could have stopped much earlier," Zylthar said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I could have," Cole agreed. "But where's the fun in that?" Word of the humans' performance spread quickly. Delegates who had dismissed humanity as an evolutionary curiosity now clamored for seats at the next trial. Zylthar, though disturbed by what he had witnessed, pressed on. The second test involved thermal extremes. Cole was placed in a chamber gradually cooled to sub-zero temperatures, simulating the icy void of a failed planetary terraforming attempt. The goal was to measure his ability to maintain cognitive and physical function. At -10 degrees Celsius, Cole showed no visible signs of distress, though he occasionally rubbed his arms. At -20, his movements slowed but remained deliberate as he worked on a dexterity puzzle designed to test his coordination. By -30, frost formed on the walls of the chamber. Zylthar's assistant, Violus, voiced concern. "Professor, this is nearing the limit for most species without protective adaptations. Should we intervene?" Zylthar hesitated. Cole's breath came in visible puffs, his lips turning blue. Yet his hands continued to manipulate the puzzle pieces with surprising precision. At -40, Cole completed the puzzle, raising it triumphantly toward the observation window, before collapsing onto a heated mat provided by the technicians. "I might have rushed the last piece," he joked, his teeth chattering. "Didn't want to keep you waiting." The gallery erupted in incredulous applause. The next trial was designed to push the limits of auditory resilience. Cole was placed in a soundproof chamber that emitted high-decibel sound waves, simulating the environment of an industrial disaster or a collapsing starship. By the 10-minute mark, Zylthar noticed a pattern. While most species showed signs of agitation within seconds, flinching, covering sensory appendages, or collapsing under the auditory assault, Cole sat calmly, his expression meditative. At 15 minutes, he began humming a tune. By 20, he tapped his fingers rhythmically against his leg. When the trial ended at 30 minutes, Cole emerged from the chamber with a shrug. "Honestly, I've had worse," he said. "Corporate team building retreats can get pretty loud." Zylthar felt a flicker of something new, not just respect but genuine awe. The final trial was the most grueling a simulated environment with increased gravitational forces. Cole stepped into the chamber, where the artificial gravity was gradually amplified. By the time the force reached twice the galactic standard, Cole's movements slowed, his breaths coming heavier. At 3 times standard gravity, most species would have been immobilized, their internal structures unable to withstand the pressure. Yet Cole pressed on, his muscles trembling as he took another step. Zylthar leaned toward the microphone. "Dr. Cole, there is no shame in yielding. Few species have reached this threshold." Cole gritted his teeth, a determined smile forming. "I've got one more step in me," he panted. And he did. As the gravity returned to normal, Cole collapsed to the floor, gasping for air but laughing. "Well, that was fun," he managed between breaths. The technicians helped him up, their expressions a mix of concern and admiration. Zylthar approached, his tendrils curling in what passed for a Zentharian bow. "You have exceeded every metric we set, Dr. Cole. I am forced to admit that my understanding of resilience was incomplete." Cole clapped him on the shoulder. "Glad I could help. But hey, resilience isn't just about the body. It's about the mind too. That's where we really shine." Zylthar's luminescent eyes brightened as a thought struck him. If this was humanity's physical resilience, their psychological fortitude must be even more profound. He resolved to explore it further, convinced now that humans were more than just a biological anomaly, they were a force of nature. In the aftermath of the trials, Zylthar found himself re-examining not just his views on humanity but the very metrics by which resilience was measured. The tests had confirmed that humans possessed an unparalleled physical endurance, but Cole's offhand remarks about mental fortitude lingered in Zylthar's mind. If humans could endure so much physically, how did their psychology factor into their survival? He broached the subject with Cole as they walked through the symposium's arboretum, a sprawling garden enclosed by translucent panels that revealed the swirling nebula outside. Dr. Cole Zylthar began, his tone measured. Your physical endurance is extraordinary, but you hinted at another form of resilience, psychological, I believe. Can you elaborate? Cole smiled faintly. Sure. Pain tolerance and endurance are just the tip of the iceberg. Where we really stand out is how we handle stress, fear, and uncertainty. It's not that we don't feel those things, we just learn how to keep going despite them. Zylthar's tendrils twitched in thought. Fascinating, but surely there must be limits. Fear, for instance, is an evolutionary safeguard. When it becomes overwhelming, doesn't it hinder survival? Cole nodded. It can, but humans have a knack for adapting to fear. We find ways to push through it, even when it doesn't make sense. Sometimes it's sheer willpower. Other times it's humor or hope. Those things can keep you going when nothing else will. Humor, Zylthar asked, perplexed. Yeah, Cole said, grinning. Sometimes you laugh to keep from crying. It's like flipping the script on your own emotions. Keeps your brain from spiraling too much. Zylthar made a mental note. Humor as a survival mechanism? It was a concept he had never considered. The opportunity to observe this psychological resilience came sooner than expected. A few days after the symposium, Zylthar received a distress call from a nearby station orbiting a volatile star. A containment breach in the station's energy core threatened to destabilize the entire structure. The situation was critical, time was running out, and evacuation was proving difficult due to rising radiation levels and failing systems. Cole volunteered immediately, despite the obvious risks. Zylthar hesitated. He had seen the human endure pain, cold, and gravity, but this was different. The situation was chaotic, unpredictable, and terrifying. You don't have to do this, Zylthar said as they boarded the rescue vessel. Cole adjusted his equipment, his expression calm. I know, but I can help, so I will. That's how we work. The scene at the station was pure chaos. The containment breach had caused a cascade of failures, and radiation alarms blared incessantly. The few remaining crew members were panicked, their coordination deteriorating as fear took hold. Cole stepped into the command center, immediately taking charge with a mix of authority and reassurance. All right, folks, he said, his voice steady. We're not dead yet, so let's focus. What's the core pressure reading? And you start shutting down non-essential systems to buy us time. His calm demeanor was infectious. The crew began to respond, their panic giving way to action. Zylthar, observing from a safe zone, was astounded. Fear should have immobilized the human. Instead, it seemed to sharpen his focus. The situation grew more dire as the radiation levels climbed. The only way to stabilize the core was a manual reset from within the containment chamber itself, a task that carried a near-certain risk of lethal exposure. I'll do it, Cole said without hesitation. The station's commander, a towering Drenari, shook her head. That's a death sentence. You've already done enough. Cole met her gaze, his expression resolute. If I don't, we all die. I'd rather take the chance. Before anyone could argue further, Cole suited up and entered the chamber. The environment inside the containment chamber was a nightmare. Temperatures soared, and the air shimmered with radiation. Cole moved deliberately, his breaths measured as he worked through the sequence to reset the core. Zylthar monitored from the command center, his tendrils coiled tightly in anxiety. Dr. Cole, your vitals are spiking dangerously. Are you sure you can continue? I'm fine, Cole replied, though his voice was strained. Just give me a second. Despite the grueling conditions, Cole maintained his composure. He completed the reset sequence just as his suit's radiation alarms hit critical. Stumbling out of the chamber, he collapsed into the arms of waiting medics. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, but he smiled weakly at Zylthar. Told you I could do it. Back on the rescue vessel, As medics worked to treat Cole's radiation exposure, Zylthar sat by his side, his tendrils resting in an unusual gesture of solidarity. "You risked your life without hesitation," Zylthar said. "Most species would have been paralyzed by fear. How do you overcome it?" Cole's voice was weak but steady. "You don't overcome fear. You carry it with you and keep moving anyway." Zylthar was silent, his bioluminescent eyes dim as he processed the words. Humans, he realized, didn't conquer fear, they transcended it. The rescue mission was a success, and the station was stabilized. Cole's actions became the subject of widespread discussion among the galactic community. For Zylthar, however, the experience went beyond admiration. It was a revelation. Resilience, he now understood, was not just about enduring hardship. It was about maintaining hope and humor in the face of despair. It was about making choices, even when every instinct screamed to give up. And humans, it seemed, had mastered that art. Cole's recovery aboard the rescue vessel was slow but steady. Despite the radiation exposure and physical toll, he remained in good spirits, often cracking jokes with the medical staff and the crew. Zylthar, ever the observer, stayed close, using the opportunity to study the interplay between the human's physical and psychological resilience. "You've been through more than most species could endure in a lifetime," Zylthar remarked one evening as he visited Cole in the infirmary. "And yet, you continue to find humor in your situation. Is this part of your adaptation?" Cole, lying back with a nutrient drip attached to his arm, grinned faintly. "You could say that. Humor's a release valve for the pressure. Keeps us from snapping when things get tough." Zylthar tilted his head, his tendrils curling thoughtfully. "It seems counterintuitive. Surely humor trivializes the gravity of the situation." "Nah," Cole replied, shaking his head. "It's not about ignoring the gravity, it's about lightening the load so you can carry it. Sometimes, laughing at the absurdity of it all is the only thing that keeps you sane." The rescue vessel returned to Zylthar to a hero's welcome. News of Cole's actions had spread throughout the galaxy, sparking both admiration and curiosity. Delegations from dozens of species awaited their arrival, eager to meet the human who had defied all expectations. As Zylthar stepped off the ship alongside Cole, he was struck by the shift in the crowd's demeanor. Where skepticism and condescension had once dominated, there was now genuine respect and even awe. The Zyltharian Institute wasted no time organizing another symposium, this one focused entirely on humanity's unique resilience. Delegates from across the galaxy filled the hall, eager to hear directly from Cole. Cole took the stage, his bandaged hands a visible reminder of his recent ordeal. Zylthar introduced him with a speech that was uncharacteristically heartfelt. "Ladies and beings of the galaxy," Zylthar began, his bioluminescent eyes glowing warmly, "we gather here today not merely to study a species, but to understand a phenomenon. Humanity, represented by Dr. Terrance Cole, has shown us that resilience is not just a matter of biology but of spirit. They endure not because they are impervious, but because they are willing to confront their limits and surpass them." The audience erupted in applause as Zylthar stepped aside. Cole adjusted the microphone and took a moment to survey the crowd. "I'm not sure I deserve all this attention," he began, eliciting a ripple of laughter. "I'm just one guy trying to do the right thing. But since you're all here, I'll do my best to explain what makes us tick." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Humans are fragile, sure. We get sick, we break bones, we get scared. But resilience isn't about being invincible. It's about getting back up when you've been knocked down. It's about learning from the pain instead of letting it stop you." Cole paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "What makes us unique isn't that we don't feel fear or pain, it's that we've learned how to face it. Sometimes we push through it with sheer determination. Sometimes we lean on each other for support. And sometimes we laugh at the absurdity of it all. Whatever it takes to keep moving forward, we do it." The symposium continued with discussions and questions from the audience. Delegates shared stories of their own species' trials, comparing them to humanity's experiences. While some traits were unique to humans, others revealed universal parallels, sparking a sense of shared understanding. During one session, a young Aurorian researcher asked, "Dr. Cole, If resilience is about confronting pain and fear, how do you know when to stop? Surely there are times when enduring further is unwise. Cole nodded thoughtfully. Absolutely. Resilience isn't just about pushing through, it's also about knowing your limits and when to ask for help. That's something we're still figuring out as a species. But I think what matters most is that we try. Even when we fail, we learn and come back stronger. By the symposium's end, humanity was no longer seen as fragile or reckless. Instead, they were celebrated as a species that embodied the spirit of perseverance. Zylthar's report, titled The Paradox of Fragility: Lessons from Humanity, became a cornerstone of resilience studies, cited for generations as a groundbreaking exploration of the interplay between biological limits and psychological strength. As Zylthar walked with Cole through the illuminated gardens of the Zentharian Institute that evening, he felt a rare sense of gratitude. "Dr. Cole," he said, his voice unusually soft, "you have not only changed how I view your species but how I understand resilience itself. I am indebted to you." Cole smiled, clapping him lightly on the shoulder. "It's mutual, Professor. You made me see my own kind in a new light. Turns out we're tougher than I thought." Zylthar's bioluminescent eyes glowed brighter. "Indeed, you are." As the galaxy continued to reflect on humanity's lessons, one thing became clear: resilience was not about perfection or invulnerability. It was about rising after a fall, finding strength in vulnerability, and choosing to face the unknown with hope. And in that regard, humanity had much to teach the stars.